I'm glad you're not a doubter. You're my biggest advocate because I am the star of the show and you do a great job of really promoting me. I appreciate you. One of the thorniest issues that new managers run into is when they're faced with managing former peers, folks that they'd been in the trenches with, folks that they had shared some very personal things about how they felt about the company. And now they're being asked to toe the company line, to hold policies, and they've elevated into a position of leadership. I find that as I coach new managers, they tend to have four different employees that roll up into them. And in this episode, Frank and I look back on our own experience as new managers, but also in working with lots of new managers, and talk about the four different types of peers that you're going to have to manage and how to navigate some of those waters, how to get them on your side, in some cases, how to say goodbye. Hope you enjoy this one. If you do, please share it with another new manager.
You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Mathews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
You can't say God on the air.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Hey, Frank.
Ian, you technologically savvy son of a bitch.
Yeah, so this was going to be a 1 hour show, but it's going to be 45 minutes now because old Mathews couldn't get the Zoom links working today, which is actually what happens every single Wednesday for 70 weeks in a row. Partly I do it just to make Frank incensed because he has like a troop of 11 people to make sure his Zooms always work when he's in charge of it.
There's no doubt. The good news is I was just closing my email, so I wouldn't be bothered during this. And your email from 11:07 when that link came through.
Oh, that's good. So this one's at least on your side. You're taking some credit for my screw ups, at least.
I'm taking no credit for your confidence.
You should. That was 11 minutes ago.
Or your fucking stubbornness.
You should have got that. My staff is not as large as yours, you bastard. I travel lighter.
Neither is your humility. Can someone please help? No, I'm good at this.
I'm fine. Leave me alone. Don't send people to help.
Allow me to manage my former peer when it comes to tech.
Frankie, how long ago was it when you took your first management job?
So technically, like I was a project manager. I was managing people, but like a manager. 2000 I was a costing manager. So 2000 January, like I don't remember if it was January of 2000.
How many people reported to you?
A handful. Like the job that I think I was a true manager for the first time was January 1st 2004. There was three of us in the same role, and we had 25 people who reported to us. But like I was responsible for at least 8 to 10. What was that position? I was production manager. Was like my first true management role.
So you had 7 or 8 guys reporting to you who built houses.
Yep, and several of which were older. Several of which were. I moved divisions, so it wasn't a lot of peers, but it was a lot of people who were older.
And you were what? Probably 27.
27, 28, yeah.
27, 28. My first management job, I was probably 25, and it was managing maybe a dozen sales reps, different sales reps, all of which every single one was significantly older than me in that role. That was the first time I had anyone reporting to me.
And I was just able to manage to get myself a nice cup of coffee delivered while we were recording, which is wonderful. But it had nothing to do with
You say you were able to, again, someone on Frank's staff brought him a coffee. He did not get his ass up and go get it himself. Someone brought it in.
I've been back here slaving away, trying to get on this damn podcast.
Frank always runs at least 5 employees too much for what his actual business volume is, because those 5 are always doing little personal things for him, his little staff, his little concierge. So mine was yes, mine was a long time ago. So like yours, 20 years ago. But I found a pattern that from that first management job, I probably took another 10 or 12 new teams on when I'd be promoted, over 20 years at least, both at GE and at MBR. And I kind of found a pattern in the way teams start to break up when you get promoted, when you were a peer of some folks, and then you got promoted up a level. People tend to kind of fall into 4 categories. And that's what we're going to talk about today is really how to manage your peers when you get promoted into a leadership position. And I think the best way to know how to manage them is to think about them in categories. So for me, the 4 categories, and we're going to go through all of them. There's the advocate, there's the doubter, there's the worrier, and there's the exposed. So those are my kind of 4 terms that I use when I talk to, usually I'm teaching a class to new managers when I talk about this, because it's one of the main things, Frank, that I get questions about from new managers is how do I manage people that used to be my friend or my peer, and now I'm in a leadership position. And it's challenging when you're young, but I can remember going from region manager to senior vice president, and now regionals that I had been friends with and bitching about the same things for 7 years. Now I had to be their boss, and I had to be the one delivering the direction that I used to bitch about to them. And that's touchy because they could look at me sometimes and be like, I know you don't believe what you just said, because I sat in rooms with you for years while you railed against the very policy that you are asking us to go fulfill. So that can be challenging, regardless of what position you're at. If you go from a president to CEO, and there were 6 presidents before, and now you manage the 5 presidents, it's just as hard as going from a project manager to a construction manager, managing 5 project managers that used to be your peer. It's the same challenges are there.
And so in a lot of instances, when I got promoted, it wasn't that it was, I was managing the exact people. But I was managing people kind of like it, right? Like when we get into the exposed, it's kind of not too dissimilar from someone who has what's called imposter syndrome. So when you move into a management role, you have a lot of imposter syndrome, because we've talked about this before in this podcast. Like you don't really, if you're humble, you really don't know what you're doing as a new manager, and you think everybody knows it. And most people do know it. So there is that part of it. But in my instance, what I did is I got promoted and was moved. So I wasn't managing the exact same people. I was moved to a different division, and I would manage, same group of type of people, but it was different humans that I knew. But what you could do when you get into a new management role is you want to be friends with everybody. And if you become friends with everybody, this is something Ian helped me with earlier in my career, but if you become friends with everybody, you can't manage them. And what you have to be able to do as a manager is you have to separate the management side and the business side. Now, I've gotten to a point in my business where, like, I like to be friendly with everybody, but who I become friends with, like, I'm a young dad. I have a bunch of friends. I have a very busy life. Like, employees can become friends, but it takes a very, very, very long time. It takes to get to a certain point, but it's one of those things that I've learned that you can't allow those people to quickly become your friends, because it's very, very hard to manage them.
So I want to stay on imposter syndrome for just one more minute on this, because it's real and everyone does feel it. And frankly, I feel a bit of it every day. I still feel it, things I'm involved in that I'm not terribly experienced in, that I'm trying to figure out on a day-to-day basis. I'm sure you feel the same way some days of running a huge company that you started, where you're like, I don't know.
There's parts, there aren't parts of your day, parts of your week, parts of your month where you don't feel like you belong. You're not growing. So like at first it can be something that's crippling, but eventually it becomes something that fuels. And what happens when you're in a position like I'm in now, I own the business. So, hey, let's all just put this out there. I'm not the expert. Someone else needs to take the reins of this. Kind of like I'm hoping Ian would say with Zoom. I'm clearly not the expert. Will one of you handle this so we don't have to deal with these issues? He hasn't. He still thinks he's got it. But the point of the matter is, like, it permeates a lot of your business and a lot of your dealing.
Your words are hurtful, Frank. They're hurtful. You should be careful with words. They're powerful.
The truth can be.
They're powerful things. But my opinion, when someone's feeling imposter syndrome, the advice I always give people is to label it. To label the thing that you're most worried that everyone is thinking, and say it out loud to the group or individually to everyone. So if you're a brand new manager and you're just figuring it out, a lot of people kind of tell me that, and I'll say, why wouldn't you just tell everyone that I'm figuring this out, right? I'm new to this. I don't have all the answers. I'm hoping to learn and grow along with you in this role. But I do think there's a lot I can bring to it with energy, with my thoughts, with my background, my skill set, my curiosity. I'm going to get better in this role. I'm not a finished product on day one. There's no reason not to just label your imposter syndrome, the way you're feeling. We've talked about this before in a presentation. If you're nervous, tell everyone you're nervous. Tell everyone, hey, I'm a little nervous to be in front of a group this big, first time doing it, and everyone will get behind you and rally. When people don't get behind you as a new manager, when you're feeling imposter syndrome, is when you puff your chest out and you remind everyone about your title. You remind everyone all the time about your authority and about the pecking order, and you get really focused on organization chart, and you should listen to me because I said so. That's how you get everyone to back down, when you try to lie to everyone that you got it all figured out. Sometimes it's best to just come in. Frankie, I came from a completely different industry when I came to a home builder, and I would sit in front of Ryan Holmes' seasoned executives, and they'd want to know what I was going to do to fix the finance company. And I would say, look, let's get this on the table. I have zero experience with home builders, with finance. I have zero experience with this specific company. I don't really have the answers yet because I haven't spent enough time talking to folks like you and people in the office. I do have a lot of experience fixing other broken companies. Here's some stuff I've done. But if I were to sit here and tell you I had the answers, I'd be lying to you. And I don't think you'd appreciate that. And it would just dissipate the room, because they came in to fight me. Like, what are you doing here? Why did they hire you? And I would just pretty much come in and be like, what am I? I would say the same thing I knew they were going to say, and just take it out of the room, take the air out of the room.
And then it's the M&M moment. Tell everybody what's wrong with you, and then say, what are you going to say about me, right? Leaves the person with no bullets. And then the next part of that conversation is this. But what I would really like to do is I'd really like to understand your business. So can you give me an overview? In addition to that, can you tell me where we don't? It doesn't need to be hurtful. Can you give me a summary of what we're not doing well, maybe 3 to 5 things, and 3 to 5 things that if we fixed, you'd be quite happy with the process. And what I'll do is I'll take it, I'll internalize it. I'm meeting with all the other regions, and I'm going to see what can I do in short order to start making some change. And I've been in that meeting with you. And the other thing you said is, guys, I'm committed to helping. Like, I can't help it. I can't fix what was here before. I have to learn. There's going to be a steep curve. I'm committed to that. I need your help. Like, everybody wants help. Like, who doesn't love someone who asks for help? Like, people, they relish at that.
And there's, at the end of this, let's go through the 4 people, but at the end of this, there's a series of questions that I ask of a new team whenever I come in that can help you kind of get through some of this. But I think first you want to figure out who on your team is who. So let's start with the easiest one, in my opinion, and that is the advocate. So when you go from, let's say there's 10 people on your team and you get promoted and now you're the manager of a team that you were on, there are probably a handful of people you were close with, friends. You'd go out after a meeting and drink beers and talk shit about the meeting, these were people that you would go lean on when you just needed to complain or vent. A lot of times people at work become your best friends because your other friends just don't know what you're going through. They don't know how bad the software is that you're trying to use to get through your day. They don't know how ridiculous some of the antics and policies of your senior executive are. They just don't get it. And so a lot of times you can make really good friends within a company because they're going through that shared battlefield moment, almost like a military where veterans have kind of a common bond. You get that common bond because you've been through the trenches in business. And so when you get promoted, there are going to be a handful of people that, for this very reason, are so excited you got promoted because they know you, they know your culture, they know your values, they know that you're the right stuff. And also selfishly, they know that their friendship to you is going to mean opportunities to get promoted. It's going to mean more pay. It's going to mean more autonomy. They're going to have freedom to kind of do things they want. You're not going to micromanage people who you trust and that you're on top of. And so these are the kind of folks that they're the first ones to call you when you get promoted. And they're the first ones you would call to say, I got promoted. If they didn't find out another way, they could not be more excited.
That's right. So I'm going to take this from the opposite side, right? You're talking about rooms where you were promoted and you knew people. Rooms where you're promoted and you don't know people, you're also going to find people who come to you. And they're still advocates. And they're advocates for one of a couple of reasons. They're the leader of the group, and they're not threatened by you, and they're excited to see a new blood. So similar to what Ian just said, but that person exists. There's the new, young, hungry people who they don't give a damn who their leader is. They're more worried about their own careers, but they want to ingratiate themselves to you. And there's the person who's fallen out of favor with the last regime. Or like when I moved in, I was a third manager in a division where there was two prior. One of the guys was a dick and everybody disliked him. So they saw they saw in me a new opportunity to reinvigorate their career, and they became advocates right away. Now, as a manager, it's great when you have advocates, but you also have to realize brown nosers aren't going to get very far. And you have to be very careful of who you let into your inner sanctum. Even if you do have a handful of advocates, you got to be careful of who you pick and choose. But those are the types of things that will happen, if you get promoted into a different group of people that you don't know.
So when this is an awesome point you just made. So when I came to NVR, I was a hire from the outside. So I was not promoted from within my peer group. But I had advocates within the first day of meeting some offices, and they were the exact person you just talked about. They were people that were very talented, that were frustrated with the way the previous regime was running things. And I represented change, and they wanted change. So we're going to get into the Worriers. Most teams don't want change. Most people don't want change. This group were talented people that liked the company and what we were doing, but they didn't like the local direction. And they needed to see that there was light at the end of the tunnel, that someone was coming there to change. And so just by me being there as an outsider, not from the industry, there were, I would say 10, 15%, maybe 20% of every office that I'd go stand in front of as an executive that were just fired up. I was there. Like, we're so excited you're here. Can I sit down with you? And they're like the first people, can I sit down with you and share some of my thoughts on what we could do to change? Even though they didn't know me, they were advocates right out of the gate.
Yeah. And that's real. And if senior level management is good, and Brian Holmes' senior level management is good, is very, very good. They knew. They went and found you because the founder was great, but he had lost touch of management, and he'd lost touch with the younger crowd, and he was no longer really willing. He wasn't in a position anymore where he wanted to do the roll up your sleeves work that you were needed to do. And he was in a position where he kind of earned that right, so they gave it to him. But at the same time, there's people who work at that company like, God, this management system doesn't fit me, but I love everything else, but it's not right for me. And what you represent as a new piece of blood is, maybe this is the hope I've hoped for, that is the person I can kind of latch onto, will see that I'm talented, that see that I'm working hard, will see that I'm doing these things. And what will happen is this: some of the advocates that you have initially will fade. Others will remain advocates because they're going to put in the work. And you're going to realize this person's got the goods. And you knew that walking in. Like, I've walked into situations where, like, here are the two people who are stars. And in some instances they were right. In some instances they weren't. And then what you'll also see is there's emerging stars. Ooh, these people are under the radar. Nobody mentioned them, but wow, they put together great results. And Ian and I both measure things similarly. We look at like reports and results. Like, you start to realize pretty quickly, an advocate and good with results, that gets you with a circle around your name, because that's somebody who can become a long-term player and has potential upward mobility inside of an organization because you believe in the mission and you can do the damn job.
So pros of the advocate is they're going to get your back on initiatives right out of the gate. You don't really need to sell them. They kind of get it right out of the gate, what you've wanted to change for a long time. And if they're an advocate, they know you probably think along the same lines as them. So not much selling. They're going to tell you the truth. I love that about an advocate, is they'll be like, hey, that new initiative you just rolled out kind of fell flat. People are pissed. And it'd be like, really? I thought that meeting went well. And I'd be like, well, they're not going to tell you the truth. So these folks can kind of tell you the temperature of your team, because they're still perceived by their peers, even though they know that you're a little closer with the leader, they're still perceived as safe to share. Versus you are now a manager, you're not perceived 100% to share on everything. And I'd say the cons is, if you're not careful, they could use this personal relationship to leverage you, to take advantage of you. Try to get little favors, you start coming in a little late, leaving a little early, taking longer lunches because, you're their friend,
Or they think that their personal relationship with you is going to net them a promotion, and they're trying to angle that way to be likable, so that you'll push them into better communities
without earning it. Maybe their production drops a little bit, because my friend's going to get me a promotion, and so they're not producing it. So, I'd say with this person, lean on them as much as you can, and use them, to check the temperature of team, to help lead some initiatives. Just as they're using you to further their career. But I would say you want to slowly start to distance yourself out of work. So if this is a person you used to go out with for happy hour every Friday, maybe not so much. Maybe occasionally you do that. You want to start to put some personal distance between this person. And that doesn't mean don't get along with them. Don't still be close with them. But I find that it's just really hard to mix church and state for too long. If you're really close with someone outside of work, it's why there's so much dysfunction in family businesses. They see each other all the time outside of work, that it just kind of blurs. Not saying completely cut yourself off, but be careful.
Especially in the beginning. The way I've handled this before with people that I've been close with is like, look, let's take a break from some of these things. I still love you. Get in, do the job, prove to everybody you're here because you could do the damn job, not because you're my boy. And when that happens, we'll pick back up. But we can still rely on each other. We can still talk. But just publicly, we got to do a little bit of less of that, because I'd be doing you a disservice as your leader to let people think you've got this because of your relationship with me.
Yep. So next person, I'm going to skip down to 3, Frankie, is the worrywart. And this could be up to 60% of your team. I mean, most people in general, I would say the Worriers are always the majority of the team when there's a new manager, because people just hate change. They like status quo. So, this person just worries about everything. They think the new manager is going to end every bit of happiness they've ever had at work. They're going to change everything. At worst, they worry that I'm going to get fired every day when they come into the office because this new manager is going to clean house. I dealt with a lot of that every time I would take on a new region. Rumors would start spreading of, oh, Ian, he doesn't play around. You get results or you're out. Because the truth is, I was kind of a hatchet man in the company. Like, they were always giving me the branch that was broken. What do you do with a broken branch? And normally replace the manager, replace their managers, replace a few of the worst performers. So, but within a year or two of taking on a new office, a third of them were left standing. It was kind of neutron bomb. The office building's there, but there's a lot of shadows on the wall, and that there's truth to that. So some of that is founded. The Worriers should worry a little if they're not performing.
Kind of like when I buy a portfolio of 75 single families that are not performing, old Frankie can of paint Cava is going to come through and get rid of all the non-performers.
Old can of paint is going to make this work.
Old can of paint. I want to talk a little bit about the doubter, which we skipped, and for time I know why we did. Why
Oh
don't you
no, we're
hit
gonna get back to doubter. We're just gonna go warrior first. So let's just
All right.
finish that one out.
Why don't you finish up Worrier? Because I dealt with it, but less than you, because I'm nicer. I'm not as much of a hatchet man.
But I'll guarantee you, you had just as many warriors as I did, maybe just not as much, but they were worried you were going to change things. You're going to do
Yeah.
things different. The warrior, and this is the most common person on your team, is that they will calm down really quickly if you just show them how unfounded their fears are. So, it's kind of the old fear setting of, what are you worried about with me being in this position? And then you unpeel the onion. What else? What else are you worried about? They just need validation that you're really not looking to shake the apple cart as much as they think you are. I'm going to
add in on this. Most of the worrywarts are people who are good performers who have nothing to worry about. And what you need to do is you need to remind them of that. So what I do as a business owner now, we've gone through, so this is a real story. I showed Ian my org chart. He goes, wow, a lot of changes up top, a lot of faces I don't recognize. Ian knows my business very well. He invests heavily. He's got millions of dollars invested in my business. He's worked with our leadership team and trained them. He knows my team. Yeah. Like, Carla was in here earlier joking with him. Like, he knows our team. And when he sees a bunch of faces he doesn't know, it means we've had some change. We've had either some turnover, or we had some growth or something, right? So the way that we do it is this: we precede it. We say, so-and-so's coming in, these are their strengths. And when so-and-so comes in and takes that role, what I will have them do, or what the manager will have them do, is say, you should go sit down with these 4 people, the worrywarts. Sit down with them, talk to them. We don't want them to go anywhere. They're great. We love them. They do great jobs. Just assure them, because that is real. And it's usually people who don't need the reassurance, but their performance doesn't dictate it, but their personality does. So you just have to be very careful and make sure you are aware of those things and you foster those relationships. And what you can do very quickly is you can turn a worrywart into an advocate with a 30-minute coffee. Get to know them, talk to them. Yeah, very, very quickly.
I think the last thing I'll just say on warriors is there are warriors on every one of your team, especially when you're new. And until they get comfortable, they're not going to be productive. And so it's your job as a leader. These could be very productive people that just aren't productive because they're worrying all the time about their job or what changes you might make. Until you make them comfortable with you and your mindset around management and where the company should go, they're not going to be productive. And the problem with that is it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. If they're walking around all day worrying about losing their job, they're not going to perform and they're going to lose their job. So it's your job as a manager, bring them into your inner circle, ask for their advice, check in with them frequently. When they give you recommendations, go make some of them a reality. Give them comfort that their fears are unfounded.
Very much so. And it usually can be just a conversation. Did you ever see the thing called the strengths interview? That's a whole podcast we should do at one point and just talk about how
it's Buckingham's the guy that did First Break All the Rules. That's a great little tool.
It's a great tool. It's basically just a conversation starter. And I remember when I was 28, I think I was 28, sitting down with people going through that. And I can still remember the conversations and what people said their answers were, because it was the first time I had done it. And it's a really nice way to get the worrywarts on board.
So before we get to the doubter, this was a quick one too. The exposed. The exposed is the person who is on your team who knows that you know all of their little dirty secrets. So they've had the boss snowed for a long time. They're not a great performer, but they've convinced the boss there's a lot of reasons outside of their control, which are bullshit, and you know it because you were their peer. So maybe they're saying that they had a bad territory, but you know that they spend half their time at the mall instead of actually doing their job. Or it could be someone who's just spreads a lot of misinformation and talks shit about the boss all the time, and you know they're going to do that to you. So this person, the exposed, knows they're exposed, that their secrets are out because you know a lot more than the last guy did because you've been in the muck with them. And for a short while, this person's going to give you 110%. They're going to work harder than they've ever worked in their life because they know they're not a hard worker or a good person, and they're trying to convince you otherwise now, but you're just going to get a short burst of energy and initiative from them. And if you know enough dirt, the way they've behaved with the last couple of managers, they are not going to change for you. Don't be fooled by this person. They're not people. A tiger does not change its stripes to spots. Like a tiger's a tiger. And at some point, those old behaviors will come back. So you're better off starting to look for their replacements right away.
Yep. And this is also something that might be sensible depending on where you are as a new manager. And this is something you gave me advice of when you came from GE, and I didn't heed it initially. If you move into a new role, find out who one of the exposed people are and get rid of them. And if you do that, what happens is you very quickly you show people, like, you're going to know walking. If you work at a good company, you're going to know as a new manager in a new division who the non-performers are or the malcontents are. And coming in and just getting rid of somebody who doesn't fit your culture right away. You see this all the time in sports. A new coach comes in and just gets rid of 20% of the roster who don't fit their makeup. But it's a way to very quickly establish and get kind of people on board pretty fast.
I got a real quick story and we'll move on to the doubter on the exposed. So before my first promotion that I talked about to sales manager, my boss was trying to help a guy who was in Iowa, and he was kind of a who moved my cheese kind of guy. He wasn't moving on with the times. His company, his big customers were kind of losing money, so they weren't spending. And so my boss would ask me to go out and help him, show him some things I was doing, how to prospect, how to find new leads, how to go get into power plants and other industries he wasn't spending any time in. I went out to Iowa 3 times. Every time he would complain that he didn't understand why Bob was sending me there, that I didn't know nearly, he had forgotten more than I knew about the business, even though I was kicking his ass in sales starting from nothing. And he would just grumble, and I would try to help him. I'd try to show him things, and he would say they were all stupid and I'm a better salesman than you, like 3 times. And I would try to be politically correct with my boss because I knew he was trying to help him. So I'd be like, well, I think he's coming along. And I wouldn't really totally trash him because he was my peer at the time. I got promoted. That was the first guy that called me. Oh, I just want you to know I'm on board. And he's full of shit. That guy was gone in 3 months. I took him out. I went out and met with him. I'm like, you can't tell me something different, that when I wasn't your boss, you told me to my face you didn't believe in anything I was doing. I didn't know anything. I know you're not on board. I'm going to find someone else to do this job. And I was really honest because I just didn't like the guy and I didn't want him on my team. And he was exposed and I knew that he wasn't going to change who he was. And then the last one that we're going to talk about is the doubter. And the doubter is different than the exposed. The doubter is blatantly to your face going to tell you that they don't think you should have got the job. And the reason they can do that is they're usually very good performers. So the doubter thinks that you're not experienced enough, thinks someone else should have got the job. There's a good chance that the doubter thinks they should have got promoted and that it's bullshit that you got the promotion in the first place. And you can just sense it. They might not outright tell you that, but you can kind of sense from them that there's just an overall disrespect and disregard for you getting the position. This is normally only maybe 1 or 2 people on the entire team. This is like 10%. Yep. Most people aren't going to be that obnoxious. And it's normally going to be someone who has so much production, is so good at their job that they feel a little bit untouchable that they can act this way.
So I have 2 very different experiences with this, and they're different. One was, I'll do this one first. My first management job, the one I talked about earlier, I moved into a production manager role. There's a grizzled veteran is in that role. He's had that role for 15 plus years. He's great. Everyone loves him. He has absolutely no desire to do anything else. He's in a perfect job for himself. He's great. There's a young guy who's about 2, 3, 4 years older than me, something like that. And he was pissed that I was there, pissed. And so I move in and I'm his peer now. And I move in and he's just a dick for everything. He absolutely didn't think I deserved the job. He didn't want me there. He couldn't understand anything in any way that I was there. And it was just acrimonious the whole time. So I very quickly turned the senior guy into my advocate. And I realized that I was going to be kind of working uphill with this other person. I'd just be successful despite it. And the best manifestation of this was we had to do our annual plan. And the annual plan is complicated at a corporate company. You have to like go through line by line on the line item on the budget, and you have to like put things together. And I was told, work with him on it. He did it last year. I was like, okay. So I went with him and I asked for like 8 different times, like, how can I have this? Can I? And I didn't go to anybody else. I just did what I was told. I went to him and he didn't share any of it. So we go into a meeting with our boss, and I just worked my ass off and I just tried to like conjure this. I've been with the company for like 4.5 years at this point. I was like, I'll just figure these things out, and I'll just, this is how I've seen it. I'll do my best. And I got embarrassed. Like I like my boss, Paul Mock, goes like, what the hell did you do? Like, didn't you get with so-and-so? And I said, well, yeah. And he goes, this is terrible. He goes, you need to redo this. So I waited for the meeting to end, and I walked in that dude's office. I'm like, you motherfucker, like you absolutely set me up. So you had a choice. Give me the damn shit from last year so I can build this, or I'll walk down the office and say you're not cooperating. Pick. He handed me the book. And then I did the work. But you're going to face that as a manager. I don't know if you ever faced anything like that, but like I faced the doubter as a peer.
I mean, almost every promotion I've ever had, there was at least one doubter, whether they told me to my face or they just kind of tried to keep doing things their way and not change. I would say though, the doubter is not one that's like an automatic fire. I don't think that's it.
Can I give a different story?
Yeah.
So there's another one. So I interviewed for a sales manager job, and then ultimately it was a general manager job. And I interviewed against a whole panel of people. And one of those people on that panel was a woman who ultimately worked for me 90 days later. So in like some weird cosmic situation, they're like, well, she lost an interview to him. He got the job. Then they moved her to my division. So I sat down with her within a month and I said, welcome. I know this is awkward. I was like, can we have a conversation? She said, yes. I'm like, do you want to be here? She's like, I do. I go, cool. So clearly, you know, I'm new to the role. You are up for the same role as me, so everyone thinks very highly of you. Can I ask you what you want to get out of this? And I let this person have agency over what happened. I was younger. I was 31, 32. They're like, yeah, I would really like this. Like, I would really like to get that role. So, all right, why don't you and I come up with how we can kick ass in this role together? And then why don't we go seek counsel together with one of our bosses? But I won't say it was my idea. We'll say it was yours, but I'll facilitate it. What do you think of that? She loved it. And she ended up getting promoted to the same position within a year. She did an incredible job for me. She became an advocate of mine, and it was very, very, very rocky to start, but it turned into something that was very, very, very positive because she was incredibly talented.
Well, so you only know it's a doubter if they're a really good performer, because if you're not a really good performer, you're probably going to fall into one of the other buckets because you need to endear yourself to the new manager because you don't have the results. You know that you're kind of, your job's a little bit at risk because you haven't been doing a great job. If you're incredible at your job, you can give signs that maybe I don't respect the fact that they put you in that job. So the only, and I think where a lot of managers get this wrong is they let their ego get too involved. And the question is, the question more should be, okay, what would happen if your doubter left? And the answer is normally, well, that's like 30% of the production on my team. That would suck. They're really good. And it's like, okay, why don't we imagine a world without your doubter and tell me how you're going to go hit your number? Wouldn't it be better if you spent the time to go convince the doubter that you could be a good leader, that you actually have their career best interest in mind? I'm going to go back to NVR again. They hire a young guy. I'm 28. All the managers who reported to me were in their 50s. And those managers had been promised that as the company grows, you're going to get opportunities to grow into a region manager job. And then they just go hire me in the dark of night, kind of like Cleveland Browns leaving for Baltimore, and announce me. and they bring them all in like 2 days before I'm starting and say, we've hired a guy from the outside, no mortgage experience, no home building experience. They didn't tell them I was super young. And then I walk in and they're like, what the hell? Like, I'm so much younger than them. And all of them were doubters. You could just see it in them, like the arms crossed, just frustrated. And I had the same conversation with all of them. Like, look, I'm not going to say that the way that this was handled was great, but I didn't handle it. I was hired by someone because they weren't convinced you could do the job. Now, whether that's right or wrong, that's how they feel all the way up to the CEO of this company. So you can either work with me or you cannot work with me, but it's not going to help your career here if you don't work with me, because I was hired to come fix this place. You could be part of the solution. And if you are, I promise you, you're coming with me, because if we fix this thing, I'm moving up and you're coming with me, or you can fight me every step of the way and I'll find someone else to do your job and I'm going to fix it anyway. Because that's what I do. I come into businesses and I fix them and I'm going to move up. You're either with me or you're going to go somewhere else. And I had to have that conversation with all of them. And I had to show them that I cared and I listened to them and their ideas mattered. And I had to promote them, give them lots of kudos in the corporate office, give them exposure. I had to win them over. And I had, 5 of them, and 4 of them stuck with me for a long time. One of them couldn't get their head wrapped around it and they were gone.
But what ended up happening with the doubter for both of us, how we were presented with the doubter was slightly different. We did similar things. We realized they had talent. We tried to get them on board. We tried to show them we had support. We listened to them, and we helped them get where they ultimately wanted to go. It's kind of like that coach who gets a star performer and has to get that person to just buy into the team. And if you buy into the team, what happens is you get a better free agent contract. It happens a lot more than you see in college, but it's the kind of thing that there's a system to it. And as a manager, what you need to realize is you're going to enter choppy waters. And the best way to do it is, I think, to embrace the tough stuff. And the tough stuff is, I'm glad we didn't skip the doubter. The doubter to me was the meat of this whole thing. The doubter is the person who is who could ultimately become your best champion. And as you're looking to move up personally, think about that. I took someone who was against me. That's management. Getting them on board, producing, and we're all going in the same direction. That's where you earn
your money. The doubter is where you earn your money, because your job is to get your top performer on board with you. And you should spend all of the energy you possibly can to get them there. Now, if they can't get there, you can't just let them bully you for years. You have to give them some time to let them thrash around a little and say their piece. But your job is to convince them that you are going to be accretive to their career. Frankie, I got my car towed 3 times when I lived in Chicago from parking illegally and around Wrigley Field and places like that, or, being too drunk after the bars to drive home and taking a cab and then coming back in the morning, my car's gone. But there was a sign so it's the worst to go get your car back. God, it's the worst. It's in this like South Side, scary neighborhood to go get it. You got a cab over there. You're waiting this long line. It's freezing ass cold, snows everywhere. There's a big sign. These ladies worked in like a little trailer. They were just ladies working at the door. And there was a big sign over it that said, "The women at this desk didn't take your car, but we're here to help you get it back." And I always remembered that sign. I loved that sign because it was trying to dissolve, like, please don't yell at the ladies at this desk. They're just doing a freaking job. And I always remembered that whenever I had a doubter, I would kind of tell that story to the doubter and say, I didn't promote me. I didn't put me in this job. I went for it like you did, and I was chosen. I didn't do this, but I can tell you this. I'm going to be your biggest advocate if you perform for me, and I'm going to make sure you get the next job. So I would always use that story, and that's what I'm going to finish this episode with. That's the approach you should take with your doubter. Get that top performer on board.
I love it. I've never heard that story, but I love it.
All right, brother. Hey, good seeing you. I'm glad you're not a doubter. You're my biggest advocate because I am the star of the show, and you do a great job of really promoting me. I appreciate you.
With that, I'm leaving.
See you.